Hello, everyone. Welcome to Careerist Interviews. My name is Sofia Tahanova, and today I'm interviewing Charles Sammons. Hello, Charles. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good, good. Thank you so much for coming on for this interview. Really happy to have you. We got to talking a little bit off camera, and I'm really excited for all of you guys to meet Charles, who is one of our teachers with Careerist. Um, First thing I wanted to walk through is just kind of like what this interview is going to consist of is like first we'll get to know who Charles is, what his family's like, what his hobbies are like, then we'll find out how his career progressed, and then we'll talk a little bit more in depth on careers towards the end. So to begin, Charles, tell me about your family.
Thanks for asking. It's good to be here,
Yeah.
Sophia. Thanks for having me. So it's my family, my wife. Um, so my wife, I have three daughters. They are my two oldest are in let's see, they're college age. One of them is currently in Brazil. She's serving a mission, and then my middle daughter is in college, and my youngest daughter is in high school, finishing up high school, and will be going away to college. And then we have a dog, Candy, and two cats. That was interesting how we ended up with them, and actually seven tortoises.
No way.
So yeah, so
That's so cool.
so we have yeah, I was just saying to my wife the other day, so we have 10 pets.
That's a
She's
big
laugh.
family. Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's fun.
Can you give us
We
a quick little story about the tortoises?
y- yeah.
Please.
So when we bought this house, it was funny because we bought it from some friends. And they had only lived in it for a little while, maybe a year or two, and we'd come over to visit, and my wife really loves this house, and so when I found out they were selling it, or that they were going to move, I reached out to him and I said, hey, are you guys, I heard you guys were moving, and he said, yeah. And I said, well, it just so happens we're looking for a house too. And they got excited, and so we came over, and of course, my wife just, looked around. She said, "Yes, I love this house." And I knew that the previous owner, his name was Kevin. He was on the side. He did like exotic pets, and so there's a little side yard on the house. It's really small. It's just outside of our kitchen. I have three tortoises. And I said, "Oh, wonderful." And he said, "We want to build a place for them in in the house where we're moving to. Do you mind if we leave them here while and then we'll come back and get them?" I said, "Not a problem." That was 10 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah. So since then, of course, they never came back to get them, and they've since moved out of state, out of state. And so a couple of years ago, about a year and a half ago, we found that they had laid some eggs, and so we scrambled and we found two of the babies, and then the neighbor brought another one to us. And then this year we were, as a matter of fact, just a couple of months ago, we were the guys were doing our yard, and one of them said, "Oh, there's a tortoise out," and so in your yard. And so we thought, "Oh, one of our tortoises got out," because they're actually really fast if they want to be. And come to find out, it wasn't one of our tortoises; it was a baby. so
Mm,
now we so now we have four little. We have three. I don't know, adolescent turtles. I don't know, bigger turtles in the
yeah,
terrarium that are just about ready to go outside, and then we have a baby in there. So we have four. We have seven tortoises in all.
that is so
Yeah,
cute. I love that. Tortoises are
yeah,
adorable. I think like
yeah. They are cool.
yeah. And the cats don't mess with them, the dogs don't?
Oh, actually, the dog doesn't. The cats, though, unfortunately, they just like to turn them over and watch
Oh,
them, struggle on their back. So we have to be,
so sad.
we have to be vigilant. I say my wife and my daughters are pretty vigilant about making sure that the cats stay off of it.
That's really good.
So yeah, so it's always a good time.
Yeah. From a previous interview, I remember you sharing some on your hobbies, and that is my dog. In the previous interview, I remember you sharing about your hobbies, and are doing like 3D printing, and you have like you like golf and things. Like, can you share a little bit of what you love to do outside of work with us?
Oh yeah. It's it was funny. I was just talking to my daughter today, and she was laughing because I I just like to see if I can build things. I like to see if I can do things. I like taking things apart. We it was funny because we went to Disney World for the first time about 5 years ago, and they had the Avatar ride, and I just thought that was so cool. And I was sitting there and we were leaving the ride, and my wife was looking at me, and I was thinking, and she goes, "You're trying to figure out how to build one at home, aren't you?" And I said, "Well, you could." And I started talking about it. She's like, "No, no, it's too big." So she knows me. I love building things. I have this fascination with um, things that and I think I might have talked about this on that previous interview. I things that you can do with just one tool, right? One, just something like a knife, right? A chef and a knife can do a lot of things, right? I mean, with food. And so I love to cook. I love to cook out Texas barbecue. That's fun. I love the science behind it. And yes, 3D printing is something that is I've just recently gotten into, that I just think is fascinating. And I'm always trying to see what I can make. As a matter of fact, I
Yes,
this is
please
one.
show us. I was gonna ask, cause like, do you mind showing us?
Yeah, no, not at all. So this is one of my latest things that I'm working on. This is a, as you can see, it's
Ah, that is
a,
so cool.
yeah. So it's for my nephew, right? It's a Iron Man helmet that I have in various pieces here. I did a oh so I did a um, Mandalorian helmet, for my daughter. And but my favorite one, this has been something. I mean, this was the thing that I first imagined doing when I saw it, was this. So when I still remember being a kid when Star Wars first came out, standing in line and going to the movies and seeing the stormtrooper, and just ever since then, I thought, in the back of my mind, the kid in me says, if I could do everything over again, I mean, in my fantasy, I'd love to be a stormtrooper, right? They're bad guys, but still, they look cool, right? So, but I've always just wanted to do that, and so and so I've got, I'm one of these guys that I practice and I practice it and I practice it until I get really good at it. And so I have various pieces of helmet all over my office, that I think, oh, I'll do something with that. But yeah, that. And then I like playing golf, because it's fun, it's relaxing, it's something that where you can just go, and you're outside, you're in nature, and you're competing against yourself.
It's like casual sport.
Yeah, right. It's
Yeah.
but there's a lot to it, right? I mean, again, there's a lot to it. This the swing, just the ball, and but there's a lot to it, right? And there are a lot of, metaphorically speaking, I mean, golf is a lot like life. I think that one of the reasons that I like it so much is because no matter, how bad your swing is, no matter how bad your hit is, every shot is intended to go towards the hole, right?
Yeah.
So you're never out. You're never out. Sometimes you might take a mulligan, you know, but you're never out of it, right? You're always, the goal is always to right your trajectory, and aim towards the hole. And I love that. I love that about golf. And so, Yeah, those are probably, technology and then of course doing things with my family. That's the most fun. I mean, all these helmets and stuff I'm building, or my daughter's like, "Oh, I'd like to." It was funny. I was laughing the other day. I've had this thing since November, and I haven't built anything for myself yet.
Ah.
All of that stuff has been for someone else.
I
Because
mean, it could be the acts of service in you, like, one of the love languages, like, you just love doing things for people, so it's like you love to satisfy them,
yeah,
so it's like you
yeah,
you you're gratified from just making them happy, like, you like seeing them happy, so it's like, that's nothing wrong with that,
yeah, and I don't get to see the look on my own face when I look at it,
right?
right? So it's always good to see it on somebody else's. And so
Yeah, and just, like,
yeah,
internally, you're happy because you see their reaction, so I
yeah,
I can I
exactly.
can definitely relate to that a lot, is, like, wanting to do things for other people just because I know it's gonna make them happy, and that's like, in return makes me
Yeah,
to see them happy, so
right.
totally get it. That's awesome. Your hobbies are really cool. I feel like you can probably from the previous interview that I heard, is like, based on how much you can talk about your hobbies, like, you could tell how you light up, how happy you are with, like, everything that you're doing, and that's really exciting to see. And it's like, a lot of us probably try to reach that level in our life, is like, to have that kind of joy and, gratitude for the things that, we get to do just because we love to do them.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so that's awesome to hear you talk about it. I remember something you mentioned in the other interview. If you could speak more on this, which maybe, hold on, trying to think, maybe that's something you would say from your industry. Um, you spoke a little bit on talents. You spoke a little bit of, like, what makes you uniquely you, and how when you're doing the things you love, then the things that you need become easier. Can you explain a little bit of, like, how you came to kind of, like, figuring that out within yourself? Or, like, is that something that should the other question before you get into that be, tell us about your career journey? Should it will it
Yeah,
will it progress into that?
yeah. We can. I mean, I. It's funny. I can. Uh, yeah, I can answer both questions. So as far as my career journey, because I think my career journey is what has taught me that, and so
So I was like, maybe
because when I,
that's the first question I was thinking. I was like, I'm kind of skipping ahead of myself of, like, I really want to know more on that uniqueness, on that, like, how'd you discover this? But yeah, maybe the first question initial be like, is like, hey, what was your career journey like before, what did you start out? Like, how did you get into tech? So if you could, tell us your story about your career.
yeah, so it's funny because I guess my love of computers started years ago. I mean, it's funny to think about this. There was a time when I didn't know how to use a computer. I mean, they were first out. PCs were just starting to become a big thing, and my dad always had computers when I was growing up. He's an electrical engineer, and so we always had a computer in the house. And when I was a kid, I used to program on it. And I say program. A Byte magazine used to have these basic programs in the back that you could type in yourself, and the very first game, if you will, that I ever programmed was just a little white stick that did this. And it was a skeet shooting game, and there was a dot that went across the screen, and you had to press the space button at the right time. But man, we could sit there for my
Hours.
brothers and I would play each other against on it. It was funny. But then PCs came out, and I remember really being really fascinated with them, and there was a video game that I really wanted to play, and so I started playing it, and it next thing you know, I wanted it to work better. I wanted my PC to be faster, and so I had to open it up and figure out what was going on, and I thought this would be really fun to do as a career. And so I went down, I found the place where I bought my computer. I said, hey, do you need a text? And he said, no, not. He said, not really. He said, we need somebody that can do, repairs and everything. And he said, do you have experience? And I said, no. And he said, oh, well, then what were you wanting to do? And I said, anything. I said, tell you what, I'll work for free. for, give me a couple of weeks for, I'll work for you for free. And if at the end of the 2 weeks you're not happy, then, we'll shake hands and you'll have 2 weeks of free labor and I'll go away. And he said, okay, let's do it. Well, at the end of 2 weeks, I soaked it all up, and at the end of 2 weeks, I was building more computers than his other two guys put together, and he said, "Wow, that's great." He said, "But I don't need another computer builder. I need somebody that can fix them." Well, back in the early days of building computers, it wasn't that big of a deal. I mean, we weren't designing anything, and we weren't, certainly weren't getting out the soldering iron or anything. We were just plugging cards.
Hmm.
And so it wasn't hard to figure out that when people would come in, they say, my monitor doesn't work. Well, I had one working computer sitting there with a working monitor. And so I would plug it in and say, okay, well, this monitor works and it comes on. So your monitor's bad. You need to bring it back. Or if I plugged it in and my monitor didn't come on, I'd swap a video card. My monitor would come on. I said, there you go. It's fixed. Right.
Yeah.
Didn't take very long. And so pretty soon I was his tech support. And it just really kind of, went from there, just parlaying up to, bigger and better things. And you could do that back in the early days of tech, because everything was moving so fast. And then the internet came. And what was interesting was, this will become pertinent here in a second too, because I was building computers, and then networking became a thing. Like, people were connecting their computers. This is how old I am, right? I mean, I'm really dating myself, but then people were networking their computers. And so I was really fascinated with that. And I was helping build networks, and I was working for this company that was a network-based company. And I remember, I went to work for a guy that was selling this document management system that was on Windows, and he was selling this product called Keyfile. It was a document management product, and it was really cool workflow, and I just really just loved it. I loved the idea of it and how it helped people. And um and I remember we were working with a company here in Dallas. It was American Medical Electronics, and they would get these faxes in from all over the country. And um and they said, oh, we want to bring them in, and we want them to go automatically into the system. And we said, yeah, it could do that. But then what we found was it bogged down. And they said, well, we have like six different fax lines that we bring images in on, and our system didn't have a multi-line fax server to it, right?
Hmm.
And I thought, well, there's got to be a way to do it. And so I figured it out. Well, the software company that we were selling for, Keyfile, reached out to me and said, hey, how did you figure that out? And I said, well, it wasn't hard. I mean, I called, I talked to the manufacturers for the software, and I talked to your guys and figured out what the commonalities were, and I was able to make them work. And they said, what would you say about coming to work for us as a sales engineer? I said, that depends. What's a sales engineer?
Yeah.
And they told me, and I said, that sounds really fun. And they moved me out to California, and I became a sales engineer. And like I said, that was the internet was coming, everything was spiraling. I mean, it was just really, accelerating. And then I found myself, then the dot-com bubble burst, back
Yeah.
in the early 90s, and like everybody was out of a job, or at least it felt like it. And so I took a just kind of a side trip, it's kind of a sidetrack, into insurance for a little bit. And, because I had a family by that now, I was married, my first little girl was on the way. And so I thought, well, I have to, I have to do this, right, to kind of provide for my family. But my wife could tell I wasn't happy. And it was because there was nothing to it. I mean, nothing against insurance people. It's just there's no innovating insurance, right? I mean, the
Hmm.
bottom line is, you're selling money,
Yeah.
right? I mean, and so we were talking one time, and I said, I really need to get back into tech.
Hmm.
So we sold our house, packed up, moved. We were living in Utah at the time because that's where my wife's family was, and so we moved there to be closer to our family. By the time we figured that all out, I had three daughters, three little girls, And we moved back here to Texas, and I went back to school and got my degree in software engineering, and met the company that I worked for. I met a guy. It was funny. He was at a job fair at our engineering school at University of Texas at Dallas, Eric Johnson School of Engineering. He was there, and he was looking for people, and we got to talking, and come to find out, it's like, oh yeah, I like that. I do that. I can do that. And so I went to work there, and started out as just tech support for a little bit, and then it was a newer company, and I was number 14 employee, number 14, and they were building, and so now their sales department was building, and they said we need a sales engineer. And then somebody said, hey, if you look at Charles' resume, he was a sales engineer at one time. And so they brought me in, and he said, "Hey, what do you know about sales engineering?" I said, "A lot, actually." And he said, "We need one." And he said, "Would you consider taking the job?" And it was funny because I remember him saying, "Why don't you go home and take some time to think about it?" And then, I said, "Okay." And I walked out of his office and turned around and said, "I don't need to think about it. Yeah, I want to
Yeah.
do that, right?" So, and they said, "All right, well, that's great." And so I was a sales engineer there, and I started a sales engineering department, and then I learned a lot there, about data. Because for 8 years I worked it was a product that, was allowed people to pull data out of their accounting systems into Excel. And I just fell in love with data, with the idea that, again, it's that little thing in me that says that, you just take this one thing, and from this one thing, you can do so many things. It's like, if I have data, right? What can I learn? I mean, I can, I always said, if I don't know anything else about you, if I have data about you, I can, what I mean? I can find
Yeah.
out who you are. I can see things. And so it was just so fascinating to me. And so I went back to school, got my master's degree in business analytics. And in the meantime, that company we was sold, and I left there and went to work right away for Dell for a little while. Then the pandemic hit, and
Mm.
I we went through a layoff, and but I was only out of work for a little bit, and I was able to get a job with a company called CDW, but doing as a solution architect. And uh, and so so the idea is, so I tell these things because, what's interesting is it's my my talents, I think, that have, or my interests that kept me in tech. But what's interesting is during that journey, um, what I found was there are not just things I like to do for work, but there are the things that I like to do at work, and I need to feel like I'm contributing in a way. I need to feel like I have some kind of control over what I do. I'm
Yeah.
not a control freak, but I just need to feel like, I'm not just
Contributing.
being,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, I'm not just being dictated to, right? That I'm
Yeah.
actually, making a difference. And when you get into the corporate world, you find that they've already figured everything out. They've got really high paid, high dollar guys that they
Yeah.
hire to figure out, make decisions, and so then it's up to you to execute.
Mhm.
And so at first I was kind of like, I feel like I need more input than this. But I got to thinking about it, and I thought, there are really things that I like about the corporate world. I mean, the autonomy. You have a lot of autonomy, mostly because they don't know who you are,
Yeah.
right? If you're far enough down on the totem pole, right?
You just got
Um,
tasks and you just need to execute.
yeah, they just,
Yeah.
you want to make sure that, your blip's not coming on saying, "Oh, this is a problem," right?
Yep.
So there are some good things to that, and especially when you're working from home, right? Because I remember I would tell my boss, "I need to go do this." He's like, "Then just go do it." You know,
Yep.
as long as your work's getting done, you just go do it.
Mhm.
He teased me one time. He goes, "You need to change the background on your camera so that nobody knows where you are."
Yep.
Right? He
It could be
said, as long
anywhere.
as you're, yeah, exactly. And so what I learned from that was I realized that I liked the corporate world offers some great things, stability, benefits, and, all of these different things. But and those are wonderful. Those are great for my family. And
Mhm.
so it made sense for me to do that. And then I realized, well, there is a part of me that I have control over, and that's my free time, right? You know, as long as I'm doing what I need to be doing as a husband and as a dad and as an employee, I mean, the rest of my time is mine. And my kids were getting older, and they were, they were wanting to go do their own things, right?
Mhm.
And my wife has her own little hobbies, and so I realized I could do, I could create an environment where I could get to do the things that I think make me who I am, where I
Yeah.
can explore what do I like? What do I like to do? What kind of things do I enjoy? How can I, where can I contribute? And certainly getting out and doing service is fun. I mean, helping people is fun. I like going and doing service projects. My family and I, we've gone and we've cleaned, we've cleaned up rivers, beds, and things like that together as a family. And then you saw I showed you my 3D printing stuff that I like to
Yeah.
do, and what's fun is I can't help it. Like, I get into stuff like that, and there's always ways to contribute there. Um, but it's just finding out what makes me tick, right?
Mhm.
It's just, it's fun. I mean, it's one of those things. It's just as fun to explore it as it is to do it,
Yep.
right? Taking things apart, trying new things. I built a pizza oven in my backyard,
That's
and
awesome.
yeah, it was my wife. It was funny at first. She was like, "What? You want to do what?" I said, "Well, I want to build a pizza oven. I've been reading about it, and this was back when there weren't pizza ovens. Nobody, it wasn't a thing, right?"
Mhm.
But I said, I was reading about it, and I said, "It's really cool, the way that it works and everything." And so I started building it, and it took a long time. It took a long time because I would get to a point where I'd get stuck, and I was like, I don't know where to go from here. And I'd have to think about it, and I'd have to plan it and everything. But when it was finally finished, and I used it, then the very first time that we officially used it was my wife said she worked with the youth, the girls at our church, and she said, "Hey, I'm going to have them over. Do you think we could do like a pizza party? And they could all cook their own pizzas?" And I said, "Sure. I think that would be fun." So for my very first trial run on my pizza oven, and it worked great, by the way, but I ended up slinging 32 pizzas.
Whoa.
I
That's
know, right?
awesome.
Yeah, it was fun. So to get into the thing about talents is just, you know, it's funny. Work and what you do for a living is only part of your life,
Mhm.
right? I mean, life is what you make of it.
Yeah.
And, at any time, you have, we always have things that we don't have control over, or let me rephrase that. There are things that we make choices to give up control of certain things, right?
Mhm.
For something better, right? What do they say? Sacrifice is when you give up something good for something better, right?
Yeah.
And so
Wow.
we all agree to sacrifice certain parts of our life. Like I work. I have a family. I have a wife and daughters and 10 pets that depend on me, right?
Yeah.
And so I have to give up a certain amount of my freedom, if you will, to to do that, right? I have
Mhm.
to, because I have skills, I have talents. I have to go find somebody that's willing to trade me for what I need, right?
Mhm.
That's willing to accept that, that is willing to say, "Hey, I need what you can do, and I'll trade you what you need to support your family." And
Mhm.
so, that's part of, being a dad, being a husband, just being a person, right? Is realizing that if I want the stability and the security and the joy that comes from my family, I have to give up certain things in order to be able to do that,
Yeah.
but not everything, right? I don't have to give up everything because then I wouldn't be dad, right? I
Yep.
wouldn't be. So you have to find that balance. You have to find the balance that between what you have to do and what you want to do. And I know that they say that I heard a line that said, "If God's smiling on you, they're both the same thing." Maybe, but I don't believe that, because then that means God doesn't smile on a lot of people, right?
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of people that have grunt jobs that they do, because it provides them the ability to do the things that they really do love. And
Yeah.
that's the thing, is you have to you have to figure out that equilibrium, that
Yeah.
where, where you, who you love to be and who you have to be meet, right?
Mm-hmm. A lot of us like the end goal is freedom, and freedom of choice of doing what you love. And, and kind of it would be nice to have like a job that like you're doing what you love and it pays you really well, but it's like there's like a take and give. I really like how outside of the camera you've mentioned is like I realized that the things I didn't like about the company was like selfish things that like I could bear to just kind of suffer through because there were more bonuses. There was more greater of like what I was getting out of it. Stability, insurance is like I could take care of my family, like the finances, If it's like there's a deeper why behind why are you in it? What are you doing?
Yeah,
It's like with the deeper levels, like, well, it starts off from like, I want to be free, I want to make more money. And and you keep asking, well, why do you want to have money? Why I want to support my family. Well, why do you want to support your family? And it's like it gets to the core of it. And then the things that like bother you about your career or job are things that you can kind of deal with. And it's like, I have a talent. People are paying me for my talent. Do I enjoy it? It's like I have a talent. It's easier for me to do this job. I have such experience. I can learn. I love learning and I love helping other people learn. And it's like you're a teacher, right? You help others, like you're a sales engineer. You help others with like learning this thing. So it's like it's a talent. There's an essence of like you giving your talent and getting rewarded for it. And like there's a greater outcome for it of like supporting your family. So like the why behind it is deep and like gotta do what I have to do. And like I can, in areas that I need more joy, I could supplement with like my hobbies, my sports, like my
yeah,
family, like, and you just gotta do what you gotta do at moments and like you gotta push yourself, but have that like that why. I know like I watch a lot of like self-development and things like that, like Tony Robinson and all of them. And a lot of them like go to the bottom of it of like what is your why behind why you're doing this? Like what do so it's like for students too that are listening to this, it's like you guys have to know like what is your end goal and like keep asking like well why is that your end goal and like keep going through that like 5 to 7 times to know like is this worth it for you. And it's like you need to stick through it. Like you're buying a course, this is serious, it could change your life. We have amazing teachers like Charles here who's willing to like share his life and experience. And like the goal is pursue this, see it to the end. If you have a habit or like a skill or you can learn or you want to learn and you want to do a change or a shift, like is your why strong enough? Can you see it through to the end? Because like careers can help you get there, but it's like, are you willing to meet us there? Are you willing to show up? Are
yeah,
you willing to, be with us through that journey? That's so kind of what I'm getting at is like what I'm hearing from
yeah.
you. And it's like what I'm trying to like connect back to to what who are possibly could be our viewers watching this interview right now.
Well, yeah, and it's funny because we don't always we think that if we're in a moment of you know where things are tough or where we're struggling, sometimes we tend to think, oh, what's wrong with this picture, but there's not always something wrong with the picture, right? I mean, and I tell our students this all the time. I learned this a long time ago, and this has really two things that I think were really life changing for me when I thought about, because talents are great, talents are wonderful, and but we at some point we have to say, how do we apply these things in order to get to where we want to go,
Yeah.
right? And happiness is not always a moment to moment thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember, and it was funny because I read very briefly in a Tony Robbins book, Waking the Giant Within, but he said something that I thought was extremely profound, and it really had an effect on me. And because this was when I decided to go back to school, because I was only looking ahead, just, what's going, very, very short sighted.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, um, and, and I remember, because you tend to do that, right? When you're not happy where you are, when you're not, sometimes you can get a little short sighted. And I remember it said, most people, and I'm paraphrasing because I don't remember the quote exactly, but it said most people overestimate what they can accomplish in a year,
Yeah.
but those same people grossly underestimate what they can accomplish in a decade. And I thought about that, and it really hit me. It's like 10 years from now, it'll still be 10 years from now, but where will I be?
Yeah.
Right. And that's when I realized it's like, okay, everything that happens to me today is a result of choices that I made yesterday.
Yeah.
And so, if you want to get further down the road, you can't take the first step, 50 times. You've got to pick a direction and go.
Mhm.
And then the second thing that really affected me career wise, and I think, and like I said, I tell this to our students all the time, is when I was doing insurance and I was finding it to be such a drudgery. It was I remember I read this pamphlet, and it was and I've never been able to find this story again. I don't know where the pamphlet is, but I remember reading it, and it was this big insurance company. I think it was New York Life, had hired this guy to find out what makes a great insurance agent, or what makes a good salesperson. And this guy studied. They gave him access to their executives and everybody, and so he was able to interview a lot of people, really high powered people, and then just low, first level salespeople. And and it was interesting because then he gave this speech. Everything went into the speech, and they printed it. And he said it boils down to this. He said it's not, and we've heard this before. It's not your how much money you have, your looks. It's not your brains. It's not education that makes a great salesperson, or that makes somebody successful in general. He said what makes a successful person is this: successful people are willing to put up with bad circumstances if it means a good outcome.
Yeah.
Uns- Unsuccessful people are willing to put up with a bad outcome if it means pleasant circumstances.
Hmm. Yeah.
And I've seen that play over and over and over again. People that I know that they're afraid to take the leap because where they are is very comfortable.
Yeah.
They don't necessarily like where they are, but it's better than, in their minds, it's better than the alternative, right?
Mhm.
But and people that I know who have gone on to do great things have had to go through struggles. They've had to, life growing is a
Yes.
struggle, right? And our talents are, I mean, we to I mean, a parable, right, is the parable of the talents. I mean, what does he say? I mean, it doesn't matter if you have five and you turn them into 10, or if you have two and you turn them into four. The point is that you develop them. The only person that was really, that really was criticized, if you will, was the one who said, I had a talent and I was so afraid to lose it that I hid it
Yeah.
because I didn't want to lose it. And and it's like, well, you didn't use it, it was taken away from you, right?
Yep.
And we see that all the time, right? I mean, you think there's something that you do really well, and but you don't develop it, and eventually you lose interest for
Yeah.
it, right? But yeah, that was a thing. And I tell this to our students all the time, is that yeah, this is hard, but there is so much better at the end of it, right?
Mhm.
And so and like any pain, when you get to the other side, it's hard to look back and try to remember what the pain felt like,
Yeah.
right?
In
And
comparison, it gets smaller and smaller because it's like other
yeah,
problems will keep compiling. Like there's other things like if you choose the harder path for like, you do the hard choices now, you're doing that for your future self. You're
right,
deciding to do this so that your future self can like have that delayed gratification, that delayed reward. Like because you're challenging yourself, because you're like bearing through it right now, like you know that in the future you'll be better off. But in the future, better off, you're gonna have other challenges. And you'll look back and it's like, I can't believe I was stressing or worried about that one, because you've been it, you've built that up endurance, if whatever you could call it. And it's like that's the grit. That's what you need in order to like persevere, like get through to the end. What is your why? What is your goal? Where do you want to what do you want your life to look like? Well, can you agree to bear with us for a couple more months, to keep studying, keep working in yourself. Like, if you want to change the outcome of the life that you're in, it all starts within, it all starts with yourself. Like, change yourself first, and that will change your surroundings, like, kind of like what you will attract. So it's like, it all
right,
comes back to like, are you investing in yourself and are you actually like giving yourself the time to learn and study? or you going off to binge shows again and going back to your like daily 9 to 5 that you hate. And it's like, well, you're not doing anything about your life. You have other hours in the day, like stick through it. You have like if you're a person, there's some people who are like self go-getters, and kind of like persevere through it and don't need anybody. But there's so many people out there that don't realize that they just need a team. They just need people to connect with. They need like that accountability, that help. And it's like, well, you don't have to be alone. You can go find people, you can reach out. And it's like, one of the things we offer in careers is the mentorship and like the Slack team and the group and all of these things. It's like, hey, like just reach out, be like, hey, guys, I'm so lost. I'm so, whatever. Like there we have there's things that are built into, like if you go to search, there's Facebook groups, there's like YouTubers, like go find yourself the motivation that you need, go find the books and self like start within. It's like, and that'll change your out perspective and things. So kind of went into
Absolutely.
self-help and development on things in here in this interview. But I really love hearing how you expressed, yeah, like your story of like what it took for you to get in is like first, the computer job is like, well, get me in, even if it's for free, like I want to learn. It's like you weren't gaining anything at that point. And it's like sometimes, for a while when you're taking a challenge of like getting into a course or getting into something else, you might not be getting anything out of it for a while. You feel like you're at a loss, like you're doing work for someone, but you're not getting anything in return. But eventually, with the skills, with working in that environment, you were able to kind of like find yourself in the position of like support tech, helping them fix the computers. And so it's like, you develop that, you stick through it, and then it'll kind of show up to you. Um, I want to, another question I'm wondering is like, this industry is only growing, but how can you speak on how this industry will continue developing from everything you've seen with everything, maybe our economy or not? Does it say anything to you? Um, what can you tell our viewers? Will sales engineering develop further?
Oh, yeah, I think it's only sales engineering is only getting bigger because the interesting thing about sales engineering is that the central premise of why sales engineering is so important will never go away,
Yeah.
right? Because technology is constantly changing, technology is constantly moving, and the value that a sales engineer brings to a company is the fact that in the beginning, they if a tech company wanted to sell tech, they had to find a technical salesperson,
Yep.
and those guys are unicorns, right? I mean, trying to find somebody who's very good at sales and very good at closing business and very good at bringing customers through the sales process and is very technical is just is too hard. I mean, they just don't they don't exist. So a sales engineer allows the company to go out and hire salespeople that know how to close business,
Hmm.
right? Regardless of whether they're technical or not,
Yeah.
right? One of the best salespeople I ever worked with could barely operate his phone, right? And but he was great at. I mean, he asked the hard questions. I mean, the guy just knew how to get people to say yes,
Yeah.
right? He knew how to he knew how to help people see the value in what he was doing. He was just very good at it. And I freed him up to be able to do that. I answered the technical questions, and that's what sales engineers do. So as companies grow, they're only going to sales engineers are only going to become more important.
Hmm.
And what's interesting is the industry that we're seeing right now. A lot of people think, oh, the large companies are laying people off. They're and does that mean the economy is going bad? Does that mean that tech is souring? No, not at all. There's just the opposite. What you're seeing is a shift in market share, right? For the longest time, you saw the big companies, the Amazons and the Googles and the Facebooks and now Meta, these big companies had huge market share, and they had a huge, they had to have big employee, workforces to maintain it. Well, there are a lot of up and comers. There are a lot of startups, a lot of mid-level companies. There's just a lot of up and comers that are starting to chip away at this market share, who are only too happy to hire the people that are being laid off at these big companies, right?
Yeah.
And so, it's I think what we're seeing is a shift of who needs whom, right? And
Hmm.
so, it's there's a lot of opportunity out there. There are literally just hundreds of thousands of companies, of tech companies, that are in existence. They're looking for people that are looking to grow. Everybody's looking to grow. Nobody goes into business and says, I want to I want to start small and I want to stay small, right?
Yep.
Everybody goes into business with the idea of growing, and there are a lot of companies that do that, and they need people. They need people that will help them build a foundation. And sales engineers are on the pre-sales side, and so they always need somebody who's willing to help them bring in business.
Mhm.
And so, like I told you earlier, I lived through the tech, the dot-com bust. I saw what that looked like, and this is not it, right?
Yep.
It was interesting. It was very, what you saw back then was a lot of, it felt very tentative, because you saw a lot of companies that were making a lot of money, but they weren't making a lot of money. They were being given a lot of money. A lot of investment was being made. Venture capitalists were putting a lot of money into these big valuations. Nobody was selling anything. Nobody was profitable, right? And it felt very tentative. And sure enough, the house of cards fell down after a while. But I think a lot of people have learned from that. And what you see now is you see people just getting out, and now, it's global, right? I mean, the industry is very global. People are working remotely. I mean, you may be working for a company that's based out of India, or based out of Canada, or based out of Los Angeles, or based out of Austin, or you could be, somebody around the world could be working, for a company here, and somebody here can be working for a company on the other side of the world. It's become such a global economy, and the need has just gotten so big. I
Yeah.
don't see that. I don't see it going away. A lot of little things, um, would have to happen for the economy just to, for the tech world just to tank. I mean, because everything is fueled by tech,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
And so,
As more
so
developments happen, we're gonna
yeah,
still keep needing more sales engineers and more people who are just, yeah, like, know the product well and can just talk about what they believe in. Honestly, that's all
yeah,
sales is. It's like you just advertise or you talk about what you love. It's like, I love this shirt because of
yeah,
this material. And it's like, that's how easy selling is. It's like, if you believe, if you know what you're talking about, it's like, that's all selling is. It's like, there's no more that car salesman thing. It's like, if you're selling cars, maybe there's that scheme of what a salesperson is. But it's like in tech, it's a lot more straightforward. It's like, hey, a person reached out to you because they need help with tech. So what do? You just help them with tech. Like you just explain your product, and if it works for them, it works for them. If it doesn't, it doesn't. Like there's no push. There's just like, hey, is this what you need? Does this solve your problem? Then buy it. Like,
right.
it's
Yeah,
simple these days. Um,
absolutely.
People are still scared of sales. Shouldn't be. I mean, not in tech at least. What can you tell us? I'll just keep going with other questions because we are getting close to time. Um, you know, I guess, there's two questions that kind of go against each other. So, what do you think is the most difficult for students in the learning process, and what advice would you give them who's considering this profession? What's the most difficult, and what would you advise for them considering this?
Yeah. So, I think the most difficult thing is making the choice to invest in yourself,
Yeah,
right? It's a hard thing to do, because at the end of the day, when you're by investing in yourself, what you're saying is, I need somebody else's help to develop my abilities,
yeah,
right? I need somebody else's help to develop my talents. And the fact of the matter is that, you know it's not so much that we are, um, I think that's the number one thing. So to be clear, it's making the decision that, not just to invest in yourself, because everybody's willing to invest time,
yeah,
but by investing money, you're saying, I need to pay somebody else to tell me how to do this.
yeah,
But the fact of the matter is that, it's just like with anything else. You'll always find this. I remember the first time we bought a house and I did my own yard. I thought, I'm going to do it myself. I can figure this out. And and I rented a tractor, and I remember, and I graded my yard and everything. And at the end of the day, what I realized was, did I do it? Sure. Did I know what I was doing? No. And
Yes.
so the cost that I had to put into it to fix the things that I did that I didn't know how to do, ended up costing me more than if I had just hired somebody to do it from the outset. That's been one of the hardest things for me to learn. I love doing things on my own,
Mhm.
and so what I would, so it is hard. It's hard to say I just need to bite the bullet and pay somebody to help me with this. But
Yep.
the fact of the matter is that at the end of the day, the reality is that there you have things that you want to do. You have talents, you have experience, right? We teach our students. Nobody comes into this with nothing to offer, right? Everybody has something. Everybody has transferable skills that they bring to this profession. But you need somebody to be able to point those out to you and show you what they are and
Yeah.
teach you what is needed, right? I mean, I find that there are two kinds of students. There are students who come and say, "Here's my experience. What can I do with it?" And then there are other ones that say that once we tell them what a sales engineer is, what sales engineers, what the profession is looking for, they're able to look at their skills and go, "Wait, I can do that. I've done this. I've done this." Right? But in both cases, neither one of them have been able to do that unless they had somebody with the experience that our instructors have to help them, to shine a light on it and say, yeah, that will work. That you don't need,
Mhm.
but it's okay. You don't have this. You say, because we have people. I'm not technical, really. So the last 5 years at your job, you've been using a CRM packet, product at your desk in front of a computer. Have you ever helped anybody that? Oh, well, sure. If a new employee comes in, you show them that, okay, so you've done demos, you've
Yep.
done software demos, right? You've helped people. You've explained to them, why they need something,
Mhm.
right? It's the hardest thing, to be clear, like I said, to reiterate, the hardest thing is to make the decision to invest in yourself. But but trust me, it is the when it comes to this, it's the best thing that you can do. And the reason being is because interviewing for a job, getting a job is going to be um, the most profitable thing that you will do in your lifetime. So
Yeah.
it only makes sense for you to start off on the right foot and get that right in the beginning and get those skills, get somebody who's been there. I mean, we must have 100 years of sales engineering experience between all of us. I mean, I myself have been in this industry for almost 30 years, right?
Yep.
And I mean, in literally like 26 years. I mean, if I take out the time I was doing insurance, I've still been in this industry for almost 30 years. And I can tell you, I know what I know what sales engineering requires. I know what it takes to be a sales engineer. And we there are many mistakes I made, many things that I would do differently. I don't tell people about those things just
Yeah.
because I don't want them to make the same mistakes. We
Yep.
only tell them the stuff that works.
Mhm.
And so, they can buy 30, 40 years of experience, right, to help them understand what is it that I need to move forward. And that's really all is required. Make a little bit of investment in yourself, and I promise you that we will help you see that investment is a good one, right?
Yeah. I think you said it really well. So yeah, the most difficult thing is for students to just start investing in themselves. And that's the biggest advice. What else can you kind of like before we kind of wrap it up? I have this question and then one more, but would like to say like what kind of person do you think is most well, anybody can be successful in this, so it's like hard to say, but like what do you think if people are watching this, listening to this, and they're considering, they're not sure, they're on the fence, what do you think are, the skills that they've noticed they have? Like you said, there's people that are like, hey, I've done this, like, transferable skills that are already basically they're halfway there. People trying to change their careers, whatever it may be. What can you say? Like, what kind of people should probably strive for the sales engineering career?
So that's a great question. I mean, people who are, well, first of all, people that want to change their trajectory in life,
Yeah.
right? Um, it's interesting because if you ever find that you are um, that you're in a job where it's doldrum, where every day you feel like you're doing the same thing. Sales engineering is wonderful for that because it feels like you're working for a different company, you know, practically every day because you're learning new things. You're talking to different people. You're showing them the same product, but the application is always different. And
Mhm.
what I find is the students that we have that do the best are students who are willing to one kind of just give themselves over to the process and learn, listen to what is being taught and are willing to be open minded about it because we can teach just about anybody to do these things, to do what you need to do to be a good salesperson or to be a good sales engineer, right? To do discovery. One of my favorite classes to teach is the class on value, versus price, right? Because what I always start off by saying, okay, when you're trying to show somebody something, or you're trying to sell something, what do you think is required? And it's always they say, oh, you got to be able to convince somebody of this or convince me. Well, sell what is it, ice cubes to Eskimos or whatever. I don't know. Maybe that's like not nice to say, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Somebody it's something be able to sell somebody, and what that equates to is you need to be able to sell somebody something they don't need, and that's not at all what is makes a good sales engineer, right? And so it's always fun for me to see these students like and they'll say this the chat, it's funny, it's like, whoa, this is so different because I tell them it's like being a sales engineer means you understand how to get to the heart of what a customer needs. I always use the example, if you went into an emergency room and you're bleeding profusely, can you imagine if the doctor came up to you and said, oh, you're bleeding, um, let me tell you why you want to use me as a doctor. You'd be like, "What? Are you insane? Fix it, right? I,
Yeah.
I don't care, right? I don't care how much it costs, right? We'll worry about that later. I need you to fix this. Just do the work,
Uh-huh.
right?" So it's pain, right? It's discovering
Mhm.
pain, being somebody who's empathetic, somebody who can talk to someone and find out just what is it you're experiencing? What are the problems that you're experiencing? What are the challenges that you're having? What have you tried to do to overcome them, right? And who's really willing to get down and understand what a customer is needs. If you can get to that core of what that customer needs and what's causing them pain, there is no negotiation required, right?
Yep.
It's just a matter of showing them that hey, this solution fixes the challenges that you're having,
Yep.
right? If there's enough pain there, there are no roadblocks.
Yep.
And so I think, somebody who's open-minded, somebody who is willing to learn, and somebody who is naturally, I think, curious. That's the that's the thing. And the thing that I find about our students is every one of them is like that because these are people that stopped their life midstream and said, I have to do something different,
Yeah.
right? I have a tremendous amount of respect for our students because they stopped life right in the middle of the road and said, I need to go a different direction. And they took it. To me, that is incredibly brave, incredibly, just
Courageous.
powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really is, and I always tell them that. So, if you have any kind of inkling that this is what you want to do, you're that person. You're
Yeah.
the person that we need, and trust me, we can give you the stuff that you need to get to where you want to go. But if you're the kind of person that makes the decision to stop life midstream and take a new direction, we're for you.
Yeah. Great. Well said. Thank you. Well, I find you very inspiring, so I really appreciate Charles for sharing everything you shared with us, and I love some of your funny stories and just like the adventures. I feel like I've went on an adventure with you just interviewing you. It's been really exciting.
Thanks.
Is there one final inspiration or funny story or lesson that you can share with people? I mean, you've already given so much, but just so we could kind of like tie a little nice bow on the end of this, is like anything like a
Yeah, gosh, there's so many things, right? That
right.
one of the things that in just keeping with this theme, I one of the things that I love so much about teaching this course is the are the people that I get to meet, right? And it's fun. It's fun to meet people. Like I said, just to be associated with people that are midstream, that are wanting to make a change, and I'm no different. And we're willing to share and to give you an idea as to something when. That I share with them that helps them kind of avoid some of the pitfalls. When I took a job with the company, and we use this product called Workday, and they would reach out to you and your offer letter, everything while you're in the interview process, you go through and you'd have to fill out paperwork, and it would be in this Workday. Well, once you become an employee, they just they transition your Workday account from a prospect to an employee. Well, all of that data that you accumulated while you were being interviewed and everything, it gets archived, but it's still in there. So I started with this company, and I came from this idea of be happy to have a job, just be grateful that they're willing to offer you something and pay you a salary, kind of a thing. And I remember looking at the I was going through, and it was one of these things where you could kind of dig, and I saw that archived file uh, where from my interview process, and so I clicked on it, and it opened up, and I thought, oh, this is cool. I could see kind of what was going on while I was being interviewed, and I got to this one. I'm going down, and it said signing bonus, and there was a number there, a big number, and it said not necessary because I never asked. And I was just like, oh my gosh. It was like I mean, for a second there, I wished I hadn't found the file, right?
Yeah,
And
right.
so,
Oh.
right. And so I'm constantly telling our students, it it's ask, right? My dad used to tell me when I was a kid, if you don't ask, the answer is no, right?
Yeah.
So, so you might as well ask. But we always think, oh, but if we ask, then they're gonna go, how dare you? Never mind. We don't want you. I don't
Uh-huh.
know. I don't know what we think was going to happen, but there is a um, it's a matter of. It's not a matter of, hey, we are where you want to be as instructors. It's a matter of we want to see you as students, and then hopefully as colleagues, right?
Yeah.
It's every one of I can promise you, every one of the instructors has the idea that you can get to where we are, and we want to see you there because we love it and we know you'll love it. And I think that's probably the biggest thing. That's probably the biggest message I would give is like if you're even remotely thinking about it, come and check us out. I mean, our first two classes are free, by the way.
Yeah.
That they can come and look, but come and look, see if we can't teach you something that makes you go, oh, wow, right?
Yeah.
I never knew that, or it's something that can help enhance your life. I think give us a chance. I think I think we can do it. I think you'll be surprised. So
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. Yeah. Uh,
you bet.
you got people have to just get started, push a little further and commit and just try, invest in themselves. That's a big lesson. A lot of us just live in a lot of fear. So it's like if this is speaking to you guys out there, do something for yourself, do something for your family and make a change, make a shift, but commit. Don't just pay and then forget about this course. I know I can be guilty of it, and a lot of people can be guilty of, like, signing up for some courses or lessons and then never logging in to the profile to see what's happening there, but, yeah, like, we're out there, we're trying to help people kinda change their careers, change their lives, so thank you so much, Charles. This has been so fun talking to you, and,
Yeah,
I'm
thank you.
really
Likewise.
yeah, it's been amazing meeting you. I'm so excited to share this with others, people on YouTube. Hey, this is how careers teachers are. They're this cool, they're this awesome. So join careers. We're here for y'all. So it's been amazing. Thank you so much. And everybody else, you guys, we could put links in the description about where to go to sign up for sales engineering. And yeah, read up on us more, and give us a call, email us, and reach out, and we'll meet you guys there. So, everybody, I hope you guys have a fantastic rest of your day and take care of yourself, and bye bye.
Bye.